Hello, hello, hello. All right, I'm putting a link into the chat box. This is for tonight's shared document. It's a live document. It has library news, library information, and then it will also have links to our presenter. And as our presenter talks tonight, anything that comes up, I'll add those to it. So it's a live doc, and anything you share in the chat, which we encourage you to definitely use the chat. It's our connection. It's our river of consciousness in the virtual world. And questions, definitely welcome. The closed captioning is on. If you don't see it, if you go under your CC button, you can enable it or you can hide them as well. All right, so welcome everyone. So happy you're here. And of course, this is part of Latinx Heritage Month at San Francisco Public Library, and we call it VIVA. And Latinx Heritage Month runs from mid-September to mid-October, but we always tend to make it stretch from September till the beginning of November so we can also celebrate Dia de los Muertos. So we'll have lots of events. There's an exhibit at the main library, if you haven't seen it, that celebrates Day of the Dead. And also Fernando's beautiful artwork you see there is just mammothly on this side of our main library. So please stop by. It's going to be getting a banner change up very soon. So if you haven't seen it, swing by. Also, there's a couple pieces of Fernando's work downstairs by the Correct Auditorium. Let's see, we want to acknowledge, our library acknowledges that we occupy the unceded ancestral homeland of the Ramaytush Ohlone peoples, who are the original inhabitants of the San Francisco Peninsula. We recognize that we benefit from living and working on their traditional homeland, and as uninvited guests, we affirm their sovereign rights as First Peoples and wish to pay our respects to the ancestors, elders, and relatives of the Ramaytush community. And I'll just give a quick shout out to the Sagorte Land Trust, who is an all women-led run organization out of Oakland. Check out their site, pay your Shumi tax. And there's been a lot of, like, if you just Google land back or land rights, you'll see a lot of news popping up about cities and locations gifting back land to the tribes that they belong to, including Oakland. So check that out. And if you don't know what territory you're joining us from, use this map. All right, so announcements. It is VIVA. So we do have a lot of VIVA stuff. And we are celebrating Mr. Roberto Lovato. He is our On the Same Page author for September, October. On the Same Page is a bi-monthly read where we encourage all of San Francisco to read the same book, same time. And we are going to have a book club, virtual, and then in person. That's right, we're going to gather. And I've gathered a couple times and you can't beat it, really, honestly. And mask up, we mask up, staff still masks up. 6th floor, the beautiful Soroyan Gallery. If you haven't joined us on the 6th floor, lots of space. It's going to be a lovely convo between Roberto and Vanessa Hua. And this is a partnership with Litquick and Alta Journal. Oh my God, it's our biggest literary campaign of this season. Our 17th, One City, One Book. The book is, this is Ear Hustle. Get the book now, every single library, mobile library. Y'all don't know what that means. The book mobile. Come to the big event with Earlonne Woods, Nigel Poor in convo with Piper Kerman from Orange is the New Black. But along with this campaign, we also have 2 months of programming that will that are surrounded by topics of this book. If you don't know what Ear Hustle is, it's a podcast that started in San Quentin telling stories of folks inside. And it has now expounded to be outside of prison because Earlonne was released. So that's awesome. But we'll have programs about abolition, social justice reform, re-entry, and all kinds of amazing things. There's 2 exhibits. It is the fullest campaign ever. Check it out. This coming up weekend, not this coming up weekend, this coming up next weekend, the Filipino American International Book Fest. And this is also just huge extravaganza crammed into 2 days, spanning several libraries, several locations, and just huge, amazing literary humans. So check it out. We have some streaming, we have some in person. It's all over the place. But before that, we have the amazing Barbara Jane Reyes. I am with her 3rd year of her curating these amazing panels. And this one is going to be totally no joke, Fierce Women. So come check it out Wednesday, October 12th, right here. It's easy. You don't even have to leave your house. So come check it out. October 23rd, and another amazing human alert. Sunday, October 23rd, the Correct Auditorium, readings from Uncommon Ground, Living Creatively with BIPOC. And seriously, I think there's already 23 people on the bill who are all just like amazing. So come check it out. Sunday, October 30th, in our Correct, we'll be doing a mini screening and discussion of Plague at Golden Gate. Before COVID, there was the plague. Also this same day, and I don't have a slide for it, but at our Bernal Heights Library, we will be celebrating Dia de los Muertos with the amazing Calixto Robles, who is we all love him so much. He does amazing like crafts for us. His whole family is like totally amazing. But he'll be doing an altar and a history. So you can bring your ofrendas to the library that day. And we'll also be having music from the Pena Gobea family. It's going to be an amazing gathering. So I'm going to bust this program out and head over to Bernal that day. So I hope to see you all there. All right, enough of library. But I'm so happy that, these are the programs that give me the I'm so happy to have this job feel, which we all need once in a while. We get to highlight artists and spotlight them and just shine on their amazing work. And it's really democratic. We poll the entire staff, all the staff, security, custodial, everybody, building engineers, nominate artists for whatever month it is. VIVA is the month. And then we narrow it down, they vote it down, and it comes back. And we're so lucky to have Fernando Marty as the winner of our 2022 VIVA Artist Spotlight. Marty is a printmaker, community architect, writer, and poet based in San Francisco. His etchings, lino cuts, screen prints, and constructions explore the clash of the third world within the heart of the empire and highlight the tension between inhabiting place, reclaiming culture, and building something transformative. He brings his formal training in architecture to urbanism to his public projects, including his altar or ofrendas. Fernando studied architecture and urbanism at UC Berkeley and has taught design studios at Berkeley and the University of San Francisco. Today, he works on housing issues as a co-director of San Francisco's Council of Community Housing Organizations. Originally from Ecuador, he has been deeply involved in San Francisco's community struggles since the mid-90s, creating art for and with many local organizations, including the SF Print Collective, the Center for Political Education, PODER, and SF Community Land Trust. His art and poetry can be found in an occasional zine entitled Amor y Lucha and on his Facebook notes. One of his biggest frustration is keeping his houseplants happy. And Marty is part of the Justseeds Artists Cooperative. And this is a decentralized network of 41 artists committing to social, environmental, and political engagement. And that's another huge, amazing human alert is Justseeds. And I'm going to pop all of that in the chat box, but it's in that link that I provided. And welcome. And I'm turning it over to you, Fernando Marty.
Thank you. And there's my son, I think, bringing me some something delicious for dinner. So it's really great to be here. Thank you so much to the library and to all the folks at the library who supported me being part of this event. it's weird being on a webinar where I can't see you all. I know there's like at least 40 of you out there, maybe more. But I will just launch into sharing the screen. Let's see if this works. All right, how's that?
Looks good.
There's me doing a little bit of screen printing with my son, who just walked in. He's 13 now, Carmelo. He was probably like probably 5 years old when I took that picture. That's at Mission Grafica at the Mission Cultural Center, and I'll talk a little bit about that as go on. So this is strange for me. I typically do these talks as kind of a 20-minute talk with some question and answer conversation. The library asked me to do kind of a bigger talk, so we'll see how it goes. Sort of here's my life story, here's my adventures, and these are some of the things I'm doing. I'll start off with roots, with kind of where I come from and how that shaped the artwork that I do today. So I'm originally from Ecuador. I was raised until I was 5 in a little town called Boliche. That's a picture from the 80s, or the 70s maybe, when I was living there. The church kept getting taller, so you can see the tower of the church as it is today. And my parents lived on a farm just a little bit down from the village. My mom studied architecture. She built this house, and that's the house I grew up in. And that's me. That's my dad. My dad is from Spain. He came to Ecuador when he was in his 20s, and they tried to make a go at it as farmers for a while. That's me in the 80s with some unfortunate shorts, standing in front of a ceibo tree, which is sacred tree, the kind of ceibo that grows coastal area, Guayas and Manabí, Ecuador. See it pop up again. But I came to the United States when I was 5, living with my auntie, and moved back and forth. And so growing up was really a life of experiencing the U.S., the heart of empire, and Ecuador as kind of a post-colonial country, dealing with all of the challenges of that situation. I came to the US and discovered lots of different things, comic books being among them. And I learned to draw just by tracing over comic books. These are a few covers from one of my favorite artists, Jaime Hernandez, who he and his brothers created Love and Rockets. And I would recommend the stories. And I think part of why I wanted to bring in Jaime Hernandez was, I think, he really taught me, not just by reading his stuff and copying it, the beauty of comic books and of telling stories in a sequential manner, but also telling stories of real life and how people live and the challenges that we all have, as well as kind of fantastic stories like Mr. X. And I also discovered science fiction. I loved, as a kid, I was a science fiction nerd. And these are a few of the books, given that we're at the library, of books that really influenced me growing up, the authors that really influenced me: Ursula Le Guin, Samuel Delany, Octavia Butler, who really, I think, investigated what it meant to be living in the present by looking at the future. And that is, I think, something that has also stayed with me as an artist. So I grew up in the San Gabriel Valley in Los Angeles, but I came to the Bay Area in 1990 to go to school at UC Berkeley, studying architecture. And so I just want to reflect on some of the influences from architecture. I just came from a memorial for Christopher Alexander. Chris pictured there with one of his Turkish rugs, who was very influential at UC Berkeley. He sort of had the audacity of showing examples of modern buildings, many of them, either designed or admired by his colleagues, and asking his students why the buildings were so ugly and how we could create beauty in the built environment. This is a project that he did as a participatory design project in Peru in the 1970s. But that idea that culture has embedded in it the patterns of how we live and how we design our built environment was something else that stayed with me. I'm also a writer, a poet, and June Jordan has always been one of my favorite poets, someone I've learned a lot from. But I only recently discovered at the Afrofuturist exhibit at the Oakland Museum that her background was in architecture and that she had collaborated with Buckminster Fuller on projects to kind of deconstruct what was keeping people back in the city, how to break through in a lot of ways, maybe an opposite of Chris Alexander in the modernism that she embraced, but also in the how to create participatory spaces and how the creation of spaces create agency. After school, after college, I moved to San Francisco, lived in the Mission District, and had the fortune or misfortune of moving to the city right at the start of the dot-com boom, and experiencing what it meant when a city that had embraced artists, had embraced immigrants, was suddenly becoming extremely expensive in a very rapid way. Many of my friends were being evicted. I've just come through an eviction saga myself. The folks who've been following my Facebook, they know about that. But living in the Mission in the late 90s and early 2000s, I got to experience around me the way that artists were transforming urban space as a reaction to what was going on around them. I had been doing some artwork, but not street art. I was an organizer. I was volunteering with a group called the Mission Anti-Displacement Coalition. And through that work, I met this amazing group of artists, the San Francisco Print Collective. And it was through the Print Collective that I took a turn from doing etchings and linoleum cuts to doing screen prints and learning how to repaste and put work out into the world. And that's what kind of a typical wall on Mission Street would have looked like in 2000, work created by the Print Collective and by others, reflecting the struggles of community. The other thing that I learned from the Print Collective was bringing that artwork into the world of planning and architecture. So the Print Collective helped to create the headquarters for the People's Plan, which was the work that I was involved in as a volunteer with the Mission Anti-Displacement Coalition in preparing an alternative plan for development in the Mission District that really centered people. And the Print Collective brought their skills to bring people together to imagine a future for the neighborhood. I've had over the years a whole number of teachers who I learned from, many of them from the Chicano and Mexican community here in San Francisco. Javier Viramontes is who I learned etching from. But I think more than that, Javier really created a community at San Francisco City College, Fort Lee campus, involved in changes City College, closed down. So important part of how we learn our craft is in community. Juan Fuentes and Calixto Robles were kind of the teachers for the young people who were involved with the print collective. And very thankful to Juan for, with Greg Morizumi, inviting me to, I think, one of my first exhibits ever, being, with someone who I admired very much. So, hey, young person, be in this exhibit. And then at Mission Grafica, Calixto over the years has been a great supporter. And as was mentioned earlier, he's going to be at the Bernal Heights Library, and he's, I think, done some other work at the library recently. But I think the person maybe who has been most important to me in the last few years has been Yolanda Lopez, who passed away about a year ago, just a little over a year ago. And I got to know her by starting to investigate the history of Los Siete de la Raza, which was a movement in San Francisco, particularly centered in the Mission District and now Noe Valley, around 7 young men who were wrongly accused of killing a police officer in 1969. And Yolanda became basically the creator of the cultural work related to Los Siete, hooking up with the work that the Black Panther Party was doing and that Emory Douglas was doing with the Black Panther newspaper, that donated part of the space of the Panther newspaper to Los Siete. I was able to do to curate an exhibit about Los Siete with Yolanda. And over the years, I think her conversations around what artwork is, what it does, how it connects with culture, how it connects with people, and how we can use art to question our own cultures, the way that we use iconography, either of the Virgen de Guadalupe or Mesoamerican iconography, reclaim it, challenge it, change it, living culture is something that stayed with me. I think Yolanda is part of that heritage and that learning. As was mentioned, I'm part of a collective of Justseeds. We are a cooperative of 40 artists in the United States, in Mexico, and in Canada who all do politically engaged artwork. And again, I think the work that we do as artists is often very dependent on the communities that we build, and very thankful to the companionship of Justseeds, and not just as a kind of a means to get my art out there, but as friendships and learning that we do from each other. The last 2 things before I get into kind of a little bit of my own artwork is, as I mentioned, I recently went through an eviction. I'm very thankful for the work that tenant activists have done over the years in San Francisco, the fact that we have rent control, that we have eviction protection, the fact that we have tenant right to counsel, that was won over the years by organizations such as the Clean Housing Rights Committee. I know for myself, I wouldn't be in this city doing the work that I do if those things didn't exist. And I think a lot of my fellow artists are in similar situations. It is only through rent control that the city is able to maintain its art and its culture. And finally, we are on indigenous land. This is Reimagining land. This is the first year that I'm doing the gift to Sagorte. There's a lot of work being done right now in San Francisco by the Association of Pharmacists Saloni. And they have done some amazing presentations at the library, at the Claret, where I got to first hear Drake Castro and Jonathan Cordero and Karina Gould from Sagorte really teach us the history and the responsibility that we have living on stolen land. As people who are not native, we need to remember at all times. All of the things that we are doing here are on stolen land, and we have a responsibility, and hopefully we are doing the best that we can in that responsibility. So I'm going to go through some different types of artwork that I have done over the years, and circle back to the work that's now at the library, and maybe finish up with some of the more public work that I've been doing recently. And I'm not where I'm at. I'm not seeing what's on the chat, but once I turn it off, hopefully folks are throwing questions or comments, and I'd be happy to see that as I move along. So I first began doing more serious artwork after I left college, learning, as I said, through Javier, the art of etchings and of lino cuts. So this is an etching that I did. Here's my sable from Ecuador, a tree that lasts through droughts, that uses its bark to photosynthesize. So you see the green bark. When it's young, it is has some hardy spikes all around it. The spikes start to go away as it matures and is more solidly in the ground. And it produces a cotton that was the original life preservers that was created. And if you're out at parts of San Francisco, at Inchan Park in the Mission, there's a bunch of sables that have been planted. You can see that look remarkably like it. I talked a little bit about my fascination with science fiction and the future and fantasy. And a lot of what I try to do is to meld the fantastic with the world that I'm experiencing and that we are experiencing as a culture. This piece is called Frontera, magical reed boat from Bolivia that is crossing the border at Tijuana, where the border fence goes into the Pacific Ocean. Folks might remember the 17 Reasons sign that was for many, many years, I think from the 1940s into the late 90s or early 2000s at the corner of 17th and Mission Street. And I love that sign. It was a mysterious piece. I think when I moved to San Francisco, the why had already fallen off. Thrift Town. Thrift Town is gone and the sign is gone. And it often happens, thinking about the context of stolen land. And this was San Francisco voters passed an initiative that said that no more billboards would be allowed in the city. And the billboard company immediately said, well, this is a pre-existing billboard. Let's tear it down and put up a beer sign. So you go by there now, the 17 Reasons is gone, but you might see something for mobile phones or for beer or for gambling online. I do a lot of walking around and sketching in the neighborhoods. This is called Red Flags, Banderas Rojas, and it was based on some sketches on 22nd in Folsom, in the Mission District. When I first did this, there was still a lot of clothes hanging in the Nixon district. And I think one of the signs of neighborhoods gentrified that you see less and less of that kind of lived in city. My own experience in Noe Valley was where I moved after not facing an eviction, but facing the harassment of a landlord that was making it very difficult for us as tenants in the Nixon district. Was that over the 24 years that I lived there, all our laundromats started to disappear. And the signs of gentrification in the neighborhood. Some of the images that I create are kind of associations that come up. This was done in early 2000s, image from Guantanamo, poppies from Afghanistan, and just sort of seeing those images and thinking of the orange that I associate with poppies. Those are probably California poppies, but that was the association that came to my mind in seeing the image. Prisoners in sensory deprivation. This was done in 2016, and I don't think I need to say much more about that, except that's Woody Guthrie's guitar, and it is unfortunately still as relevant as ever. I do a lot of figure work. This was done after a friend had some major operations around a cancer that he was experiencing, and we were both fans of Silvio Rodriguez and the song Sueño con Serpientes, that even folk singer was one of his songs. Last night I had the amazing experience of teaching my first class. I've done a lot of one-day workshops, but I haven't really done an ongoing class. So I'm now teaching a linoleum cut class in cultural center. I'm really excited about. I don't know, as a teacher, it's a strange thing for me. I sort of consider myself an experimenter in all sorts of things, and not necessarily a master of any one thing. As soon as I'm kind of accomplish something, I move on to the new thing. And what felt good about this class yesterday, which I think is what I admire about the people who I've learned from, is that really teaching is about creating a community and creating a space where people feel safe and comfortable doing this work. So I'm excited to be able to do that for folks at Mission Grafica. This is a piece that I did for a project about Al-Mutanabi Street that a local poet and bookstore owner created after the Bookseller Street in Baghdad was bombed after the occupation by the US. Not bombed by the US, but part of the chaos that was created through the occupation. The text in Arabic is a reference back to when the famous library of Baghdad was burned. The word ran down the river like flood. These are a couple of my early etchings, and then over time I've done a lot of playing with or the linoleum cuts, playing with that and adding color to it. So this is something that we did for an organization called No More Deaths in Arizona that helps and does policy work, migration, border. And this is a piece that we did in so working in linoleum in color. That's sort of how I got started in this, and then over time I've been doing a lot more illustration for other projects. around, a lot of them local, but then more increasingly and largely through Justseeds, meeting folks nationally and internationally on different kinds of projects. So these are some of my early posters that I did for Dia de los Muertos in the Mission District. Doing some posters for different book fairs, the Anarchist Book Fair, Howard Zinn Book Fair. And both of these kind of playing with iconography and images here, I was really trying to get at, again, kind of the heritage that I've learned from as an artist by other poster makers and other movements around, folks might recognize the occupation of Alcatraz, the I Hotel struggle, the 1934 general strike, the farm workers' eagle, the Black Panthers, and then the White Knight riots, the No Apologies poster, the line of burning police cars outside San Francisco City. An image of young people taking it from there to the next generation struggle. I have a lot of fun, doing work where I combine hand drawing with digital work, putting in a sky over an image that I've drawn, doing work in many languages, which is always a challenge, trying to figure out how to do multilingual posters in a way that respects those languages and uses the language in a creative way that's kind of a list of alternate versions. And a lot of the work comes from the connections, I've been involved in a lot of different activism, mostly around housing, but connections to, for example, here to SF Island that works with immigrants in San Francisco. And at some point, as I was becoming a US citizen, had reason to go to SF Island and get some advice around getting my papers. I mentioned already the Los Siete, and this was kind of where I first got to know Yolanda Lopez, was through the research around creating a poster that told the history of Los Siete for a project Josh McPhee, who's one of the founding members of Justseeds, carries out every year. So the library has a copy of either the first or the second edition of Celebrate People's History. There's now hundreds of posters around all sorts of little known pieces of people's history, and always makes me happy to see those when I go into a school classroom and there's a Celebrate People's History poster. This is a piece I recently did. I think there's, in this realm of how we use the fantastic to try to tell stories about what's going on around us. Here we were trying to use a phrase that Ruthie Gilmore used around the prison industrial complex, a beast, and how all beast is really connected to so many things, not just one piece of prisons that exists somewhere, connected here to enforcement around immigration across the border, the militarization, surveillance that happens on the border, the prisons themselves, and then on into cities, and the way the prison complex keeps people, tries to keep people in a subservient position. Post I recently did around with Rainforest Action Network around forest deforestation and protecting people's self-determination against large corporations. In this case, PG, which took me a while to figure out what PG was. It's the new name of Procter and Gamble, who's been tearing down forests to create paper mills. and destroying the livelihood of people. In my day job until last April, I feel correct that I'm no longer at the Council of Community Housing Organizations that speaks to until April of last year. Now trying to dedicate myself much more to art and to that connection of art and policy. But through that work, I've had a great relationship building with, for example, Justice or with the National Nurses United and CNN. One of the things about creating these illustrations that are a combination of traditional work and digital work is that I think for many of us in Justseeds anyways, we're able to create images very quickly and turn them around so they can be used in social media around some things. This was from a sketch out of my sketchbook after the Roe v. Wade overturning at the Supreme Court. Wanted to create an image around autonomy, but also we'll get into that a little bit more in some of my other posters around looking at medicinal plants that have been used for different medicinal purposes. These were plants that were used as for participants traditionally. I believe, I'm not quite remembering which plant that is that I use. That brings me to the screen prints, which are the work that I really learned to do through the print collective, and then later with Juan Fuentes and Calixto Robles. Screen prints are a lot of fun in that you can take a photograph and start playing with it, and that's really kind of what I first started doing, was using photographs, some of them just downloaded from Google and playing with them. My partner was part of a group called Prison Moratorium Project, and we used to do an annual fundraiser bowling event. So that led to an image of bowling down the prison. I was also involved for a long time with the Center for Political Education. Again, one of my early screen prints was using a photograph of 518 Valencia, now the Eric Quesada Center for Culture and Politics, and using that to create some images that reference back some Russian deconstructivist type images. And this is the last of kind of the work where I was using photography. I did some interviews with the day labor program when I was developing that other image for La Raza Centro Legal. And you'll see a lot of maps in my work. A map of Palestine from 1914, showing all of the Palestinian towns that were in existence before 1948, and symbols of resistance. I often struggle with kind of, I think when I was doing this was a time of the Arab Spring when so much of the organizing was done through social media and through text. But I wanted to kind of claim some of the more traditional symbols of resistance in this poster. This was done again through kind of the connections that we developed with Justseeds with Escuela de Cultura Popular Mártires del 68, which is kind of a sister organization in Mexico City, which had a long-standing relationship with the Zapatistas. Zapatista leadership had called for support around autonomy in their communities. So you can sort of see the architectural training that I had and the architectural illustration with kind of creating a poster. More Day of the Dead work. This work came out of conversations with Poder, who holds an annual Dia de los Muertos event for the community that they're involved in. And in those conversations with members, the phrase that in Islam, in the afterworld, there are no walls, there are no borders. I threw this one in just now because I'm going to be in New Mexico tomorrow, so I wanted to give a shout out to New Mexico. One of the things that's been really neat is in screen printing is playing with colors. So a lot of the screen prints that I showed you are done with multiple colors, which means multiple screens. This is done with one screen where I just did a roll from blue to red called bandera, ripping on the U.S. flag. And then it's done for Standing Rock. What you see below is a map of the rivers around the Standing Rock Reservation. The flag. I've been involved for a very long time with a group called Poder, an environmental justice organization based in the Mission District, and this is a project that they've run for a long time, the Secret Garden, hidden away in some backyards in the Mission District. We did this for CEJA, the California EJ Alliance. And another project that I've been involved in is a particular something that I particularly love, not just because I was a co-founder 20 years ago, but because I think it relates back to this question about our responsibility around being on stolen land, is the San Francisco Community Land Trust, which is an effort to bring land back under community control and creating permanently affordable housing. Stole this phrase from an organizer of the Housing Rights Committee, Tommy Avicola, who would shout out at our rally, "Land trust the whole city." And so I think that led to this poster of the first 20 or so buildings that had been bought through housing preservation programs. More fun stuff around Dia de los Muertos. I think I probably did this, or that may have even been the picture that I first showed of what I was screen printing with my son. When he was 5, 6, 7, he would always ask me for paletas. And we always look at the labels and see what sorts of artificial flavors. So I had this image of afterlife. We'll have all the paletas we want, all be organic. More stuff around children and education. One of my colleagues at Justseeds put together a portfolio around liberatory education and learning, and that's my contribution to that. And then more recently, I've been having a lot of fun with just ideas of things that might be like flags of the future. With the Upton Sinclair's EPIC campaign, which has been revived by the former mayor of Stockton, Tubman. And the phrase in his campaign, the closest that we've had to a socialist governor in California in, I believe, 1936, the phrase of his EPIC campaign was, "I defend, I produce," in the middle of the Great Depression. And so I turned that around to a phrase that we've been using in the housing movement around protecting, preserving, producing. And then thinking about intersectionality and what that looks like. So that was another fun piece around thinking about a flag around intersectionality and struggle. I'll just zoom through some of these because I want to get to the logo I did for United to Save the Mission, my bunny rabbit, Bunnicula, and for folks who've watched The Handmaid's Tale, That's a phrase in The Handmaid's Tale that Margaret Atwood, supposedly it was something that she found scrawled in a desk when she was a student. Don't let the bastards get you down, in a fake Latin. It wasn't an actual Latin phrase. Something that I think as the times are hard, we all need to remind ourselves. Posts around solutions for a particular campaign, and a collaborative print that I did with Monica Pineda from Chicago, around, I think this was the first year of the pandemic, looking at a portal or an opening new features. This is a piece I did again during the pandemic with a demilitarization campaign out of Chicago. And then a piece where I was riffing on a ballot measure, Our City, Our Home, and thinking about what is the city that we have, and what is this other city that is trying to impose these huge powers and this, you know, unpersonalized or depersonalized capitalism. Folks recognize a city like. And then one of the last images in this section, just thinking about land and territory that we've done for another portfolio, looked at different words in Spanish around the idea of land, in particular, the idea of propiedad social. Enshrined in the Mexican Constitution, it is a very foreign concept in the United States of social property. What is the collective property all of us own and have been? Yes. Continue. I think one of the things that, as somebody who's an activist and an artist, I've been very interested in is maps and mapping. I took a number of different maps of the Mission District for a project that I did around cartography, looking at the past, the recent past, with some of these concepts in the 70s and the future. And that's a little hone in on the first USDS map, 1859. Scratched and blew all over it, including putting in the names of the villages that have been in the Mission District and Mission Bay, and some of my experiences of living in the neighborhood. I've had a lot of fun being invited, for example, to do a project with People Power Media. I've trying to tell through animation the history of the Bay Area that has led to a lot of the gentrification and displacement that we experience today. So that was a series of, it was a talking mural that looked at the past of the 30s and 40s, and then moved into white flight, the expansion of the suburbs, urban renewal, and then kind of the latest days of struggles against displacement, what people still feel living through this. So maybe I will finish with this project that is, some of these images are at the public library right now. There's a project, and I received a grant from the San Francisco Arts Commission. So thank you, Arts Commission, for their individual artist grants. Yay! Supporting artists in San Francisco. I did a series of prints, originally going to be screen printed, but as the pandemic took over and I didn't have access to a screen printing location and a place to burn my screens and so forth, they became a combination of traditional and digital prints that I then turned into display prints. And it's really kind of, I think, where I'm at right now in a lot of my explorations around what I want to do with my skills as an illustrator and an artist, and a writer and a poet, is looking at the work that many of our young people, especially many of the folks that I know associated with Quebec, are doing to reclaim ancestral traditions and to reimagine those for the present. It's part of what I owe my conversations with Yolanda about that sort of reimagining and reframing those experiences. So for folks who know the mission, this is the Mission Armory at the corner of Mission and 14. Folks might know that that building used to be a National Guard armory. Apparently, I heard once from John Ross that during riots in Bayview Hunters Point, people in the Mission District surrounded the armory to keep the National Guard from moving out their weapons and beats or whatever it is that they were trying to move out of the armory. It had been abandoned for a long time, and it sits on a marsh. It has a basement that floods every time it rains, and so I imagined it being kind of central to a rebuilt campus for the traditional aquaculture of Mexico City that was mostly destroyed by the Conquista, by the Spaniards, but a small part remains in part of the culture. And as I was exploring this and researching it, I came across some amazing images from those times, some of them from Mesoamerican ruins, some done in those early years. So this is a tribute map of Simon Bus in Mexico City. I try to imagine the 16th Street Plaza, which was going through a big fight over what the future of that corner would be. Would it be a big luxury development? Would it be affordable housing? A lot of people in the neighborhood were mobilized to get the city to buy that land. Sort of a key landmark for the entire neighborhood. As a landmark, I imagined it as a sacred space and a sacred place. Many of the mobilizations around the plaza, danzantes would take part in the ritual reclaiming of the space, the sacred space. I wanted to bring that in as well. This is a big piece that's out in front of the library right now. It's my reimagining of Nixon Street. And as I showed some of my screen prints that were thinking about new flags or new signs that might show up on the stores of the future of our post-capitalist future. This is an idea of looking at some of those signs, some of the existing signs, and some of them being, what is it that we may have reclaimed of our ancestral tradition? So whether it is a place for bone setters and massage, whether it is a seed bank, whether it is a midwife's location where you have a birth center. When I first moved to San Francisco, we actually had one independent birth center in San Francisco on Cap Street. We no longer have that. And I brought some of the boats from Xochimilco floating down our canals after sea level rise. my friend Jackie's dog and my friend Judy. There's a long history. I gave a little talk at an elementary school. One of the kids said, "Oh yeah, Mission Street. Mission Street extends all the way down California to the Mission." And but long before that idea of the Camino Real was a trade that happened all across California, back over the Mojave Desert into Arizona and New Mexico to some of the sacred places, Center Place, Taco Canyon, and then down through to Teotihuacan, Tenochtitlan. Archaeologists have found minerals and other things that show that there was a lot of trade going on. And so as I looked south on Mission Street, I wanted to make that extension down to Teotihuacan, that's a map of Teotihuacan in the sky, and 3 then youth members, I think they're no longer, they would be considered youth, of Poder, activists with Poder. Poder runs a Bicis del Pueblo, a bike program. And I was imagining how, these histories of sports, how we use sport and activity as connection to sacred spaces. Took this image and brought in sacred ball court, recreated in game the story of the hero twins going to the underworld and bringing back what we as humans needed to survive. This is my friend Alondra, who is one of the farmers at a farm, an urban farm that Poder runs in Crocker, Amazon. And her child, Bonito. And thinking about, now being a parent, those roots that we pull up in the soil in times. The image, ground of the underworld leading up to the world free. I may mispronounce this. I think it's in Petén. And then this is my friend Sotil Flores, who is the master gardener at this farm, and who really has taught me a lot about thinking about agriculture as queer ecology, thinking about breaking through the binaries that we've been taught in Western plant understanding to a much more open and diverse way of understanding ecology and all the connections through Celia, through how pollination functions. One of my favorite places is in San Francisco, Magic Donuts. Used to be on Nixon and 20th, and was before that known for a lot of old timers as Punch Donuts, open 25. And the last of these images is my friend Tere Almaguer, who is a longtime organizer, activist at Poder, but also an herbalist, a yerbera, who really understands plants and plant medicine. And as I was doing this during times of the pandemic, thinking about the plants that heal us, bring up immunity, that farm, hummingbird farm in Pennsylvania, large part of it is elderberry, and just over the spring and summer, crazy. farmers every summer. Students school fall. And in the background is an image of Isabel healing, childbirth, good one, and also of death. So I am looking at the time. I've been talking for a whole 54 minutes. So maybe this is a good place for me to stop.
I told you you could fill it, Fernando.
So let me find my stop share. And hello.
The time does fly, doesn't it?
Yeah.
So there are lots of comments, lots of questions. There was one in the questions that I really thought was great, which was, can you talk more about how you came to blend traditional artwork with digital artwork? Was that a gradual process, or did you take a class in digital art?
Sure. The only class that I took was through the amazing work that the San Francisco Print Collective did in teaching all of us who didn't know anything about creating a screen print or putting something together with Photoshop. I barely know any Illustrator. I'm trying to teach myself some other digital platforms, but it's mostly Photoshop. And it's been a lot about just scanning the images that I draw. I often draw and then watercolor. I'll often scan the line drawing so that I can drop it back in over the watercolor so that the blacks go up really dark. Again, that's sort of my love of comic books and how comic books are traditionally were done with black ink drawing with a separate color layer. And then just pulling in images from either the Mesoamerican, Mayan, or Aztec, or other rubbings.
Someone mentioned in the chat how you can really see the sci-fi interest in your work, and for sure. Let's see. How about what year was the prison complex piece done?
Oh, that was just done a year ago. Yeah, and it was done with an activist, Mizui Akemi. I hope I'm not pronouncing their name wrong, who's in New York City. And they've been doing a lot of their activism and their research around border surveillance and the connection between border policing and the prison industrial complex.
I saw one in chat that just triggered me, which was, do you think all art should be political art?
That's very interesting. I think that art, for a lot of us, art is about reflecting our experience. And that's where this, I love the phrase of, the personal is political, and I'm vice versa. I think the political is personal. If we are engaged in our world, I think the politics will come through in one way or another. They don't have to be necessarily explicit or hit you over the head or have a slogan, but all of the choices that we make, what we choose to represent, the mistakes we make when we represent something, and how we learn from that and change that, I think reflects how we're engaging politically with the world. So I don't think art needs to be, over the head political. It's just sort of, if it's true to yourself and you're engaged politically, then that will come through.
Thank you. That was really such a thoughtful answer. And I love bringing up our mistakes and learning from that, because man, we can learn daily. One question, let's do one more. I see hand raised. If that person would like to speak, I'm going to unmute you now, or it could be a false hand raise as too. I'll ask the question, and then if that person, you can unmute if you're ready. Such an amazing and wide collection of work. What is one way that you'd love to inspire us as your SF neighbor to do or take action? To take action.
That is interesting. I am still, I'm no longer in doing housing work as my day job, but I'm still very much involved in that work. And I think there's, in particular, I think housing, but so many other issues have, we have elections, we're going to have these ballot measures. And you don't necessarily want to use this forum to promote the ballot measure that I've been working on, but I think that there's digging deep into what's behind these things. Reading. We spent a lot of time kind of trying to get at, my view, the truth about land and the importance of land, the value of land, and how to make the city affordable to most people. So I think that's one part. I think the other part, and it's kind of related to that, is the contribution that many of us make to creating a living, lively city. And for me, a lot of that's the visual artwork that I do. But as somebody who's a city walker, the gardens that I see people do, the creative use. So I'm now in Bernal, so I've got a whole new set of neighborhood that I've been getting to know, and how we make the city a really personalized place, not kind of an impersonal set of units to box people into, but that really allow for that self-expression in whatever way that comes to you.
And then there was one last chat that came through, which was a link for you to check out protest exhibit at the Letterform Archive. And I have thrown that link into the chat box.
I've been wanting to see that one.
And here's another reminder. This link right here has all of the links that I tried to keep up with. And Fernando threw down the resources just like I thought he would. And I'll just shout out one of those, which was all sorts of great books. Love Samuel Delaney. But the Celebrate People's History, if you have a San Francisco library card, you can instantly gain access to that with our Hoopla digital format. All right, friends, we have successfully done an hour and 15 minutes on the art of Fernando Marty. Woo-hoo. I know there's lots of clapping. I can feel it out there. Everyone, it's so nice to see you, feel you. River of chat, love you. Fernando, thank you so much.
There was a last question on there about art communities, and I love the Mission Cultural Center. There are other places that also have kind of cultural resources, but the Mission Cultural Center and Mission Gráfica, you can drop in, learn screen printing anytime. You can rent the space for the day. You can come drop in on my linocut class.
Cool.
But it's got such a long history from the 1970s, as does the African American Arts and Culture Complex, as does SOMART. So yeah,
our city's amazing. It really is. Mission Gráfica for sure has produced just amazing historic works. And I saw a retrospective there, like I'm gonna say it was 4 years ago. Dang, it's deep. It really is deep. So you come from a long line before you, Fernando. All right.
Thank you so much. Thank you, SFPL.
If you haven't seen the ginormous Fernando Marty outside the 100 Grove Street, get there and see it. Also, there's the Dia de los Muertos exhibit right outside those doors as well. Lots of library family members are photoed there, and then lots of authors that we love. So come check it out, friends. And thank you again. And we'll see you at the library.
Yay.